This is a story called Who's the Chef? My boss has a rubber hand, I told our Parisian dinner guests following my one and only day of work. The French word for boss is our word for chef, so it sounded even better than I'd expected. A chef with a rubber hand. You'd think it would melt. The guest leaned closer into the table, not sure if I was using the right word. You're a chef? Since when did you start working? They turned to Hugh for confirmation. He has a job? Thinking, I guess, that I wouldn't notice, Hugh set down his fork and mouthed the words, "It's volunteer work." What irritated me was the manner in which he said it. Not outright, but barely whispered, the way you would if your 3-year-old was going on about his big day at school. It's daycare. Volunteer or not, I still had a chef, I said, and his hand was made of rubber. I'd sat on this information for hours, had even rehearsed its delivery, double-checking all the important words in the French dictionary. I don't know what I'd expected, but definitely not this. Well, I'm sure it wasn't actual rubber, Hugh said. It was probably some kind of plastic. The friends agreed, but they hadn't seen my chef, hadn't watched as he thoughtlessly wedged a pencil between his fingers. A plastic hand wouldn't have given quite so easily. A plastic hand would have made a different sound against the tabletop. I know what I saw, I said. It was rubber and it smelled like a pencil eraser. If someone told me that his boss's hand smelled like a pencil eraser, I'd shut up and go with it. But Hugh was in one of his moods. What? So this guy let you smell his hand? Well, no, I said, not exactly. Okay then, it was plastic. So what, I said, is everything not held directly to your nose made out of plastic? Is that the rule now? One of our joint New Year's resolutions was to stop bickering in front of company, but he was making it really hard. The hand was rubber, I said. Heavy rubber like a tire. So it was inflatable? The guests laughed at Hugh's little joke, and I took a moment to think the worst of them. An inflatable hand is preposterous and not worth imagining. Couldn't they see that? Look, I said, this wasn't something I saw in a shop. I was right there in the room with it. Fine, Hugh said. So what else? What do you mean, what else? Your volunteer job, so the boss had an artificial hand. What else? Let me explain that it isn't easy finding volunteer work in Paris. The government pays people to do just about everything, especially during an election year. And on visiting the Benevolence Center, the only thing available was a one-day job helping to guide the blind through one of the city's metro stations. The program was run by my chef, who'd set up a temporary office in a small, windowless room beside the ticket booth. It wasn't my fault that no blind people showed up. Listen, I said, I just spent 6 hours in a storage closet being ignored by a man with a rubber hand. What do you mean, what else? What more do I need? The friend stared blankly, and I realized I'd been speaking in English. In French, Hugh said. Say it in French. It was one of those times when you really notice the difference between speaking and expressing yourself. The words I knew. Blind people, election year, storage closet. But even when coupled with verbs and pronouns, they didn't add up the way I needed them to. In English, my sentences could perform double duty, saying both that I'd reported for volunteer work and that Hugh would be seriously punished for not listening to the single interesting thing that had happened to me since being kicked out of French school. Just forget it, I said. Suit yourself. I left the table for a glass of water, and when I returned, Hugh was discussing Mr. Omwet, the plumber hired to replace our bathroom sink. He's got one arm, I told the guests. No, he doesn't, Hugh said. He's got two. Yeah, but one of them doesn't work. Well, he's still got it, Hugh said. It's there, it fills a sleeve. He's always doing this, contradicting me in front of company. And so I did what I always do, which is to ask a question and then deny him a chance to answer. Define an arm, I said. If you're talking about the long hairy thing that hangs from your shoulder, okay, he's got two. But if you're talking about a long hairy thing that moves around and actually does shit, then he's got one, all right? I should know. I'm the one who carried the sink up 3 goddamn flights of stairs. Me, not you.